Cheers.
Cheers. I do not have coffee, actually. Wish there was a touch of vodka in there. But
Yeah, really. Don't worry, there's whiskey in mine.
Is there?
No.
I was like, do we have whiskey?
Hello, and welcome to Movie Break. This is our final episode of our series for Derek's Cianfrance that we're doing. Kristen, we made it.
I know.
A very sad, long journey of watching all of Derek Cianfrance's work.
Yeah.
And 6 episodes, so 6 hours later, 6.5 hours later, we did it.
We watched all of I Know This Much Is True.
Yeah. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about his latest work, his mini-series, I Know This Much Is True. So, Kristen, you actually read the book after watching the TV series. So, I guess, can you start a little bit about kind of the differences between the book and the mini-series?
Yeah, I would say that, the miniseries hits all the highlights and the major kind of points of the story. I think that, of course, the book is pretty long. I believe it was around 900 pages. So, much more detail, much more expanded. But I also think that, the miniseries does a great job of hitting all of the things that are pretty important with, a few exceptions that just could not be included without making it probably at least 10 hours long.
Yeah, I wasn't able to read the book. How long is it? It's about
800, 900, if I'm correct. I'm trying to remember specifically, but it was definitely the higher 100.
So no, I think this miniseries really, made us want to kind of sit down and start this YouTube channel because I think it was kind of a combination of both of our interests when it comes to filmmaking, writing, the subject matter, the class issues kind of going through. So I guess we'll start off with, with this being a Derek Cianfrance television show and related to his other movies. I mean, what kind of really stuck out to you to be, something that was kind of connected to his other work?
Yeah, I think that this is definitely, I think all of his work explores in different ways, relationships, family dynamics, all of that. So I think this was, much more developed kind of generational family exploration. It also, covers a lot of just mental illness and how that is treated in society as well.
Yeah, man, it's a tough watch. You know what I think what the show does a really good job of is, like I said, combining all of his stuff earlier. I think it does a lot, similar to with, Blue Valentine, kind of the disintegration of a marriage. I think it does similar to what Place Beyond the Pines does with kind of that generational issue of, sins of the father passed down and kind of the causality of one decision affecting really everyone else. And then something that really, I don't think he has touched in his other works, but yeah, the mental health aspect and, dealing with someone who has severe, mental health issues and, the impact that it has not only on maybe immediate family members, but on their friends and their family, moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even think on the whole community as a whole, I mean, we're looking at, a relatively small town in Connecticut, a fictional town, Three Rivers, Connecticut, or I believe that's a fictional town.
I think so, yeah. Right. I think it's like kind of somewhat based on like Newark, Connecticut, I believe.
Yeah. But anyway, a very, small town in Connecticut and just the impact that even, Thomas's mental illness has on really the entire community as a whole and just how ostracized he really is.
Mm-hmm. To me, before, not to spoil the episode, but I do think that this is his best thing he has made. I might have some others that I think maybe have a little bit more of a personal connection to me, but I think this is his best overall work. And I think you getting 6 hours instead of 2.5 hours, I think it really plays into Derek's style of filmography and his filmmaking and being able to really have the time to be able to kind of tell these grand stories that have multiple different characters, multiple different layers, and being able to, divulge information later and later and later, and and to kind of find out more and more about the characters past, in the last episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been such a loss, honestly, if it had not been made in this format. Like, if for example, if he or another director had gone, let's try to make this a 2.5 hour movie, it's like, it wouldn't even be the same. It wouldn't resemble the book at all. And I think that, it speaks volumes that, from my understanding, the author, if I know this much is true, Wally Lamb, was highly involved with the production of the miniseries, and I think that that also, speaks a lot to just how well done it is, as well as just having his involvement to make it as true to the book as it could be.
Yeah, this would not have been feasible, I think, as even if you did like 3 hour long movie. I mean, with how much is in there, you would have had to kind of really drastically cut a lot of things, and I don't think it would have been able to afford the time and the effort that Derek is able to kind of show with these characters and with the story. It's funny too that because I think as soon as this book came out, it was optioned to be able to be made into a movie, and it kind of passed hands time and time for decades, and then eventually I think Mark Ruffalo, I think, really enjoyed the book and really wanted to get it made, and he reached out to Derek Cianfrance to kind of partner with him and be able to make that movie, or to make it as a TV show rather. So to me, to you actually rather, what does this mean as like a Derek Cianfrance work? How does this play in his other filmography?
Yeah, I think that most of these subject matters are things that he had definitely touched on before, in smaller scales, to be fair, more movies as opposed to miniseries. But I think that this fits into his work because it maintains the same kind of really kind of deep exploration of relationships and families. I think that, of course, this one has more depth than most, just due to the length and kind of the amount of material that they were covering. But I think that it fits, really nicely into his work. Just the topic, the tone, the way it's explored. I think Derek Cianfrance does a great job of, creating and exploring characters that are very flawed, like actual people, but very redeemable as well.
Yeah, when watching his work, you never judge people. I think everything with all the characters, there's so much empathy that goes into every single character that you understand where they're coming from. Even someone like the translator for the book, right? Like, I think in anyone else's movie or television show, she would have been kind of shown as kind of like like a bimbo, or kind of like a goofy side character. And even though she is kind of presented that way at first, you do kind of you really understand where she's kind of coming from, and like maybe her history with men, and not having a healthy relationship with that affects her to have to really kind of screw over but
yeah, I think too, that same argument could be applied to Joy, right? Like, realistically, I think that she could have been villainized, or attempted to be villainized, because of ultimately becoming pregnant with another guy's child, saying that it's his, although she may have really thought it was his and not the other person's. But that being said, I think that could have become her being the bad guy, and I think that even still, she's able to walk away from the situation being, really empathetic, character that you still feel for a lot. So I know one thing that really stood out to me while watching this was just the quality of the acting. I mean, I think that, of course, it's a fantastic story. The filmmaking is beautiful, but of course, the acting speaks volumes about just the depth that each of these actors is able to go to. So thinking first of Mark Ruffalo, who plays both Thomas and Dominic, which is amazing in and of itself that he was able to do that and to do it so well. Just what are your overall thoughts on his acting?
I think the first time watching it, I did catch myself a little bit of like my jaw being dropped a little bit, of just kind of, there are some like shots where it's like, how did they pull that off?
Yeah.
In a technical sense, but as well as just kind of really, emotionally being drawn in with it, and the empathy and sympathy that Mark Ruffalo is able to kind of do with both of these characters, and how they're so different too. You know, and how, you know, with Dominic, you know, this very, you know, rigid guy that is not going to emote, is not going to, you know, is going to lash out, be angry, whereas with Thomas, he's kind of so much more sensitive and withdrawn, submissive, and just like even the weight gain, you know, he did with Thomas. I mean, it's just amazing, and you know, really top-notch acting.
Yeah, and I think too, it was such a good detail to include in the miniseries, the fact that Thomas is heavier than Dominic, because that's definitely, you know, harkening back to, of course, Thomas has been on pretty extensive antipsychotics throughout his life, many of which, especially at that time period, had some pretty significant side effects regarding weight gain. So I think that in itself was a great detail, to have something that differentiated them and to show like the kind of frustration of the side effects with a lot of the medications.
No, it's truly, you know, mesmerizing to watch. In the scenes where they're together, you know, they do a little bit of like kind of trickery where like you can just see like the back of the head of one person, so they probably had, you know, like a double on there. But in the scenes where they're in the same shot together, I mean, it's pretty amazing. You do forget that it's, you know, the same guy playing it. You get lost into, you know, and I think this plays into like Derek's you know, great work as a director, is you forget that you're watching actors. You really truly feel that you're watching, you know, real people, you know, you know, documentary like, you know.
Yeah, agreed. I think that I would certainly say the same for Catherine Hahn. She does fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
To say the least.
Yeah, no, she is absolutely amazing. And really, I think does add a little bit of humanity and love and warmth to the story, and kind of, you know, I think this role could have, again, in someone else's hands, I think could have been pretty forgettable, and just kind of this, you know, pedestal for Dominic to kind of look at and be like, you know, maybe I can get better, maybe I can get my life back on track, just like kind of a goal for him. And she does so much more than that, and is her own fleshed out character that is really able to, you know, have her own life and be able to, you know, show that if he can get better, then, you know, maybe they can have a life together, you know.
Yeah, and I think that both of them seem as though they were a true real life couple. You know, it feels that there's a lot of, you know, deep connection and understanding between the two of them, even, you know, despite the challenges that led them to divorce. You know, it's clear that even outside of any sort of romantic love, there's just like a deep unconditional love for each other too.
Yeah, and what's amazing too is not only, you know, Catherine Hahn and Mark Ruffalo playing those characters, but also, you know, the younger little boys that play. They actually got a pair of twins to play them as children, and then, you know, I forget the actor's name that plays young Dominic and Thomas. He does dual roles as well, as then Catherine Hahn as well, the actress that plays younger her. I mean, I think overall, just, you know, everyone is on their A game and is so, again, like, you know, it's everyone's so charismatic, and you're drawn into the story because of how everyone's portrayed, and this is very like raw and real and you know, circumstance.
Yeah, I think too, one thing we have talked about as well that I really appreciated about the acting in terms of through the years, which is kind of the shocking ability for those actors to have that continuity. Like, you could watch the little boys of Dominic and Thomas and kind of see how they became like teenagers and young adults, and then see even similar like mannerisms and the way that they conducted themselves then into their full adulthood of Dominic and Thomas. And that was just really remarkable to kind of just see how well actors were able to draw upon the present day too, and kind of carry through the same personality and mannerism, quirks, all of that.
Yeah, it's just so, again, it's mesmerizing. You're watching it and you're going, how did they do this, you know? I think, you know, technically kind of listening to some of the filmmakers talk about it, I think Mark Ruffalo kind of came in and did his performances, and then I think some of the other actors were judging based off of his, but the ability for them to, especially the children actors, to kind of come in and to be able to knock it out of the park, and really show the start of these characters and show that even as children they still had those characteristics and what they would grow into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it was really, really cool to watch that transition throughout. And I think that, having that transition and getting to see them all throughout the ages, of course, adds significantly to the story as well.
So, Kristen, let's talk a little bit about the story. It's a pretty wide, long, synopsis, epic story. But I guess just in a couple sentences, how would you describe it to someone to kind of try to? How would you describe the story to someone?
Yeah, so I would say that Dominic, who is the brother of Thomas, is continuing to grapple with Thomas's mental illness and how that has impacted him, and just his feelings of responsibility towards Thomas, whether that's fair to himself or not. In the midst of all this, Dominic is really grappling with the end of his marriage to his ex-wife as well, and just kind of overall struggling with where he's at in his life and how to move forward.
I think it was a really great idea to start with the hand cutting scene. Mm-hmm. Is that how it starts in the book? Does it start with that? Okay. So in that case, then it's true to the book. But I think it's a really smart way to kind of throw you into the world, into what they're dealing with. To start it off with this kind of, horrible, violent act that Thomas does to himself, and by cutting off his hand, that kind of catapults, the characters into it. And then through flashbacks, you kind of find a little bit more about them. But.
Yeah, I think it's really smart to start with that scene because I think it really quickly draws you into the severity of the situation, right? Like, I think that if you were to say just to show the paranoia or the delusions, like, yes, you would be able to say, okay, Thomas is mentally ill. But for him to cut off his hand while saying that it is a sacrifice really showcases you just how severe the situation is at that point. And I think that without that to kind of throw you into it, it'd be easier to not see the situation quite as clearly.
Right. What do you think about the narration? Because I think, with this story, I think you need it a little bit. I think it does kind of do a little bit of explanation and kind of does give a little bit of like backstory to it. I know people give narration in movies and television a little bit of grief, but I think it was used pretty appropriate here.
Yeah, and I think too, throughout the narration, I think that was necessary too to tie it in with the book because, the narration is of course taking actual lines from the book. So not only do I think it's necessary to have the story make sense, but I also think that it really is able to harken back to the original work more too and really tie those together more neatly. Mm-hmm.
And then as far as like the flashbacks too, I think, Place Beyond the Pines, I think if you cut back and forth, it does lose a little bit. Mm-hmm. But with this, and the same thing with like Blue Valentine, I think cutting back and forth between different, times, different generations, really does enhance the story and kind of gives it its full gravitas.
Yeah, and I think too that it's important to think of it as not just going back to the past, right? Like it's going back to the past because it's still impacting the present. Like those things are still really resonating with Dominic at this point in his life. And so I think to cut those out would be kind of disingenuous because it wouldn't actually show what's still affecting him because those things are still affecting him, especially as he's dealing with what is going on with Thomas.
Mm-hmm. When this TV show came out last year, I think some of the criticism was that it was kind of bleak for no reason. It was just kind of a sad, depressing story, and even though I would agree that it can be sad and it can be depressing sometimes, especially with Dominic and just like how many horrible things he's having to deal with his life. So much death, so much despair, sadness, grief, and him having to really just continue forward. I disagree that I think it's for no reason, especially when you get to the last episode. I think it does kind of show that, even though you can have grief and you can have sadness and loss, you can always pull yourself up and you can always figure out a way to kind of continue with life. I think it is so depressing in the first 5 episodes, and then by the end of the sixth one, I think it does give a little bit of like kind of a warm hug at the end, like, hey, I know we've been through this traumatic experience of watching this or reading the book, but everything will be okay. Just keep pressing, basically.
Yeah, I disagree with the criticism that it was bleak for no reason. I think that life can be bleak. I think that and I don't think it was bleak for no reason in this story, but I also think that, cutting out the idea of hardship in life is disingenuous again too. And I think that I really disagree, I guess, with the mindset that we should just not talk about these things. And I think too, I feel a piece of that, if it's just bleak for no reason, is partially that we're uncomfortable with that level of bleakness. I think we're often, taught to hide the sadder aspects of life. And I think too, a piece of it is probably about how deeply this miniseries touches on mental illness, which has a tendency to also make people uncomfortable, especially the severity that Thomas's is. So I think that overall, I highly disagree with that assessment personally.
You know what? This might sound like pretty weird, but I even find this as like a comfort watch. I know that sounds kind of weird, especially with something that's so, tonally very serious. But no, it's almost like comforting in the sense of like kind of being taken through this kind of, almost, this journey through this maze of kind of being taken through and to kind of go get it to the end and be able to kind of have some sort of closure and the ability to kind of see these characters move past what they've gone through is like really rewarding and I think worth it and when I if it's like a rainy day and I'm home, I kind of like this is the first thing that would kind of pop into my mind to watch.
Plus, I think, too, that the ending, although hopeful, is just that. It's hopeful. I don't think that it is overly optimistic or to the point that it's dishonest. Like, I feel that it is really just kind of cautiously optimistic when I think about it. I don't think that it is one of these things where it's taking, like, episodes and episodes of sadness and putting, like, a neat bow on it or something. Like, I think that it's a realistic portrayal of hopefulness too. So I think that it would maybe irk me if it were just like, okay, here's all this sad, depressing stuff. Okay, let's just like tie it up real nice and pretend like none of it happened. But I think it does a nice job of erring on the side of hopefulness without just becoming dishonest.
Yeah, it's rewarding. It even though it is bleak, it rewards you. And even in its bleakest times, when there's the death of an infant child, for example, when, there's death of important main characters, even though it's sad, it's depressing, it's almost cathartic in a sense too. I kind of get that feeling a little bit of like this, even though it's horrible of what everyone's going through, you're able to really kind of face a lot of, I think, the turmoil with the characters and to overcome it. And to me, I find that almost cathartic and being able to, it's almost like, if you're, scared of serial killers, but watch a lot of like serial killer stuff, it's almost in this like, taking over kind of the fear and anxiety of that,
Yeah, I would agree. That's a good point. I hadn't quite thought of it like that, but nonetheless.
All right, Kristen. So after watching all of his work, with Derek Cianfrance, how would you rank them? It's going to be interesting to see, because I think we're going to kind of agree a little bit, but maybe disagree on one or two things.
Yeah,
but
so I think,
out of the 4.
Okay. As much as it might pain me to say as Blue Valentine being a longtime favorite, I would say that I know this much is true, would be number 1.
Oh, wow.
Followed by Blue Valentine being number 2. Then The Place Beyond the Pines being number 3, and then number 4 being The Light Between the Oceans. Okay. Personally.
So I'll start down and then go up. So I'm agreeing with you, Light Between the Oceans. Again, we talked about it in that review, but I do think it's his weakest work, but in no means do I think it's bad.
Yeah, I think just personally, it's my least favorite.
Yeah, I think the other 3 Maybe just 2 for you, but I think the other 3 for me are like, up there is like some of my favorite work in the past decade or so.
I just connect with them more. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'd probably go with that, Light Between the Oceans 4. 3, this is difficult. I would probably put, again, this is one of my favorite movies of the last 10, 15 years. But I think I'm going to put Blue Valentine as number 3.
I knew we were going to say that.
Yeah. Followed by, it's my chalky too, but I'm going to put Place Beyond the Pines 2, and I'm going to put I Know This Much Is True as number 1. I even though Place Beyond the Pines is my favorite movie, I think I Know This Much Is True is my favorite thing that Derek Cianfrance has made, and I think this is one of my favorite television shows of experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
And just I find it really rewarding, and thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's definitely his most ambitious work by far. I think that it's the most fleshed out with the most depth. So personally, I think that I do enjoy it the most. Although I have to say I am a little surprised that it outranked at The Place Beyond the Pines, knowing your love for that movie. But
I think we said this earlier, but I think this show does everything that I want out of a Derek Cianfrance project. I think it has the generational thing, it has the great acting, it has 90s nostalgia, because you get that from Place Beyond the Pines as well, but no, it just does everything I think I want out of an experience from this director, and I think it has the most depth of anything he's done. I think it's the best script he's ever written, and I think just directing wise, it's on a whole nother level. There's a lot of really good, a lot of filmmakers are moving towards like more the television side of things and making more miniseries, but I think he's amazing. I'm more of a movie guy myself, so I would prefer him to continue to make movies, but if he's going to keep making television shows like this, I mean, I'm all for it.
You'll be on board.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Yeah. So, Kristen, on a final note, why do people not talk about Derek Cianfrance?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that perhaps his work is a little less commercially inclined than a lot, so perhaps that's it. I don't know, too, if his work is just not as maybe it's a little bit more subtle or more kind of character study than a lot of people enjoy. I don't know. Personally, I think his work is great. I don't understand his lack of notoriety in that way, but I don't know. It's another mystery. What about you?
I don't know. I really don't get it. I get like maybe, if this was like his first thing he made, like, okay, kind of underestimating, but like I feel like he's been consistently, releasing some of the best things I've seen in the last, decade or so, and continuously not getting as much recognition as I think. I think he's, again, I think he's one of the best working directors right now as far as, in an auteur standpoint, but no, man, he's amazing. If you haven't watched any of his work, I would highly recommend watching any of them. All of them should be streaming somewhere. I would highly recommend, seeing any of his work, really. I mean, it's...
Not one is bad.
No. Yeah, even the one that we were worried about ended up being, good, but...
Yeah. And, certainly, like I said, and you said as well, the weakest for me, but definitely still an enjoyable watch. Once I found myself giving it, I have to admit I was skeptical going into it, unfairly so, but I found myself actually really enjoying it, although it still remains the last for me. So that is a wrap on our first season covering Derek Cianfrance.
It's been fun.
Yeah. So thank you for those who have been watching. If you have any thoughts, please, of course, comment. Let us know what you think. Other than that, we will be back in the near future with, we're not sure what category we're going to choose next, to be decided on that. But thank you for watching, and yeah, we appreciate it.
We'll see you soon.